Hey, I'm Thom Pankhurst, and on behalf of Renegade Guitar Company, I'd like to show you the custom shop Tom Anderson that I personally spec'd out for them. So Renegade had this idea that me, Simon, and Danny would each spec out our own dream Tom Anderson guitar, primarily because they wanted to see what we choose, but also when you're speccing a custom shop guitar, it can be quite daunting to choose things which are quite specific, and you obviously have to choose things which are going to suit you as a player. So I thought I'd tell you why I've chosen some of the things I've chosen to spec on this particular guitar and the thought process behind that, and also show you what it sounds like as well. So a little bit of background about Tom Anderson. They are a custom shop luthier guitar builders from California in the States. Tom Anderson is a person and he has a very strong idea of what the perfect guitar should be. And to that end, Tom Anderson have only ever made guitars which, I'm going to be really honest, have only ever been great. I've never tried a bad Tom Anderson. They don't make guitars which aren't literally like the highest spec, the highest options available. They literally just don't make them. They don't do import lines, they don't do cheaper models, they just make what they believe to be the best guitar. A little bit of interesting backstory about Tom Anderson. The reason that I personally know about them is that Tom Anderson were one of the first people to make Steve Vai the Gem. Obviously Ibanez make the Gem, but Tom Anderson actually have a prototype which Steve used to record quite a lot of Passion and Warfare with, and it's like this white thing. If you Google it, I'm sure it will pop up. But I thought that's really cool. So they're like, I really like Steve Vai, and so they're kind of the history of Steve Vai, but they're not like the mainstream thing, which is really cool, and Passion and Warfare is amazing. So that got me interested in them. And I also have a close friend, Sean Ash, who is an Anderson artist, who releases the most ridiculously good music. And I've had the personal pleasure of trying some of his actual Andersons, and they played amazingly, which is why I was so excited about speccing my own Tom Anderson. So in terms of what sets Tom Anderson apart from other builders, obviously, you know, like I said, they don't do cheaper options, they don't do any sort of compromise on what they think is great. And I'm going to try and describe this in a way that makes sense, but they have a feel about them. And, you know, when you try loads of different guitars, I've had the pleasure of trying so many different guitars as a demo player and, you know, just a hobbyist as well. The Tom Andersons have this thing about them which is really cool. So if I can try and describe it, there's like a tightness that comes with it. So if you ever played another guitar and you felt like when you hit a note, there's a bunch of fluff around it that wasn't exactly what you put in. Sometimes that's really cool, and that's a great characteristic for certain types of guitars. But with the Tom Andersons, you definitely get out what you put in. And that's really appealing to me as a player, because I like to be quite in control of what I'm doing. I like to experiment quite a lot with different tones and things like that. And having that as a base standard is really cool. So they feel, it's not tight, like it's not hard to bend, but there's like a tightness that just is inherent there, and it really makes it feel like you're properly connected to the instrument, because it's just there. One of the big things that sets Tom Anderson aside from other luthiers is their neck joint. They do a super unique design on these. Obviously you can see that it's got 2 bolts in there, but actually the neck design is a trapezoidal shape, and they refer to it as the A wedgie. The child in me finds that really funny because it says wedgie, but it's actually a really sensible thing. So if you look closely at it, it's 3 flat edges. Because of the way it's literally laid out, it increases the amount of contact it has with the body, which means that you're going to be able to get some more sustain, you're going to be able to get some more resonance between the body wood and the neck wood, and those are things that obviously people are after. They obviously help the way the guitar sounds, it helps it sound a specific way, and it's also incredibly comfortable as well because it's got a specific carve on it, which is great. So let me run you through some of the things that I was personally thinking about when I spec'd this guitar. I think it's important to note that Tom Anderson only do things that they think are great. And what I mean by that is that they won't do wood combos, which might be a little bit more out there. They stick to tried and true formulas that only yield the best results. Luckily they do the things that I want, which is great, but it's something to think about, you know, if you were going to spec your own. Like, you're only going to get a great guitar that's definitely going to be great. So if we start at the headstock, I've got locking tuners because locking tuners are the best tuners, and everybody knows they're the best tuners, and you know, you're lying to yourself if you don't think that they are the best tuners. In terms of the neck, we've got a satin finish neck. I'm personally not a big fan of gloss. I find that some of the playing things that I do, I like to be able to move my way around the neck quite quickly. Satin seems to be the way forward, and so I've gone for satin on this. It's really smooth, there's no unnecessary friction, you can move your hand around really quickly and it feels great. I've gone for a caramelized maple neck on this, and the reason I've done that is because it feels really smooth, it's got a really sort of tight grain on it, which means that you're not going to get as much friction as something that's like more porous. And to that end, I've also gone for a chocolate maple fingerboard. Now, the difference between chocolate maple and roasted maple, or caramelized maple, as Tom Anderson call it, is literally just, I think, the length of time that they have roasted it for. So this piece of wood is darker than the neck piece of wood, which actually makes it look more like a piece of rosewood because they've roasted it way harder, and it's quite a lot darker. And I think that really complements the look of the guitar, but it also feels great to use because it's not, again, it's not one of those like open pore woods. It's very tight, it's very smooth, and it's something that I particularly go for when I have the option to choose my own guitars. So for the frets, I've got medium jumbo frets. And the reason I've gone for medium jumbo as opposed to jumbo jumbo or large or regular jumbo, I can't remember what the option was, but the reason I went for that one is that medium jumbo sort of straddles the line between feeling somewhat Strat-like and somewhat super Strat-like to me. You know, when you get like mega jumbo frets, it can slightly feel like you're playing like a scalloped fretboard, or if you push down too hard, you're going to make the note sharp. And medium jumbo seems to be a nice middle ground with that, and that's certainly the case with this. In terms of the neck profile, we've got an even taper, and I'm going to have to read it off the sheet. It's a minus 0.020 neck back shape. That is the thin one, and the reason for that is that I like to do a lot of like tapping things. I like to do a lot of those like shreddier things, but I also like to do sort of chords and things like that as well. And I find that the thinner neck just generally helps because I come from a background of playing like Music Mans as well, and like some Ibanez guitars, and that feels really comfortable to me. But it doesn't have like a wizard, there's no wizardness with it. It's just super smooth. It's still a C, and it feels great. Like, honestly, this thing feels great. In terms of the fretboard radius, we've actually got a 12 to 14 inch radius, so it gets progressively more flat towards the top. And that means that if you're grabbing chords down here, you can grab them nice and easily, particularly with the even taper neck. And if you're doing some of those like faster lines or some of the more notey things at the top, you're going to be able to grab some of those a little bit easier on a flatter fretboard. I've got a mahogany body on this, and the reason I've chosen mahogany is because one of my favourite guitarists is Guthrie Govan, and some of my favourite tones were when he was using a mahogany bodied guitar, because he comes from a background, I think, of playing SGs, and there's certainly like a difference in the way that his tone sounds when he was using the mahogany guitars, and it's something that I've actually gone for on some of my other guitars, and it's something that I've prioritised, and I know that I like, so I went for mahogany on this. The Tonewood purists will tell you that it gives a slightly more honky mid-range, a bit more growl in there, and I think that is true, because when I'm playing this guitar, it definitely has a tight mid-range presence, and I really like that. On the front, we've got an amazing flame maple top. I mean, like, this is ridiculous. It is absolutely ridiculous. It is so aesthetic, and it's really blue. Whenever I've looked at Tom Anderson's, I've always gravitated towards the blue one, and the reason is because I really like the colour that they specifically use. I mean, this is called their Arctic Blue Burst, and it definitely looks like that. Obviously, you can see the wood grain in the flame, but there's actually a subtle wood grain over the top as well, in the flame as well, which is really, really beautiful. It's really cool. And that was actually a pleasant surprise when I took it out of the box. If we move on to the controls and the hardware and everything like that, we've got what they call the Baby Floyd. This is the non-locking version of the Floyd Rose. I personally hate Floyd Roses with the big old locking nut. I always find that it's really cumbersome. I find them annoying. This is obviously a perfect replacement for that, because you can do all the whammy bar things without having to worry about, you know, going out of tune too much and things like that, because it's literally just sat there and you can tune it using your regular tuners, which is great. We've got an HF1 pickup in the neck, and we've got an HF2 pickup in the bridge. And the reason I went for these is that I actually asked my friend Sean what pickups I would like, and he immediately out of the box just said HF1, HF2. Anderson have paired these pickups astoundingly well. Sometimes when you put two pickups together, they can sound a little bit off with each other. So one can be slightly too bassy in comparison to the bridge, or, you know, vice versa, and things like that. These feel like an extension of what you should be feeling, and that's a really odd thing to say, because obviously you want a pickup to sound different, but what I want out of a pickup is that it's going to sound roughly the same, but it's got a slightly different character rather than it being a drastic tonal shift. So that's why these pickups are in this guitar, and when I tried them, they were actually fantastic. They work so well together, and that was actually a really pleasant surprise. Not that I was expecting it not to be, but that's actually one of the things which I was really blown away by. It was that these pickups are really well voiced for each other. In terms of the switching, we've got 5-way switch, because I like to be able to use a full fat humbucker and also get some of those in-between tones. So if I start in this position, we've got bridge, then we've got a single coil sound from the bridge, so it's split, then we've got both humbuckers together, then we've got a single coil from the neck, and then we've also got a full fat humbucker in the neck as well. For the switching as well, we've got standard volume and tone, but we've actually got the VA booster switch in there as well. And in this position, it's off, and when you push it down, it's going to be on. And what that is essentially, it's not a voicing switch, but it's a subtle additional bit of saturation, and it's a subtle boost to the output of your pickups. And you'll be able to hear that when I flick the switch. particularly when you're on the split coil modes, you're getting like up to 4 decibels of added boost, and that's really useful to match the sound of the single coil sounds to the main humbucker. But it's also just really useful, so if you were soloing or something like that and you needed a bit of extra boost, you can pop it on as well. When you're in humbucker mode, it's not quite as apparent, but it definitely adds some extra saturation. There's some definite low mids that get added, I think, to my ear, and then when you're using it, you just got that little bit of extra juice just to push you over into a new tonal territory, which is really cool. So yeah, hopefully you get an idea of the reasoning behind me choosing some of the things for this guitar. Honestly, I'm actually blown away by how good this thing is. I mean, obviously I was going to be blown away by it because it's a Tom Anderson and they literally don't make bad guitars. But from the process of speccing this to being able to go and pick it up and try it out and play it and actually sit at home with it and do some things and do some actual recording with it, I'm actually genuinely astounded by how good this thing is. I'm really sad that I have to send it back. So if anyone wants to start some sort of GoFundMe so that I can have it, that would be fine. But it's going to make someone incredibly happy. If you're into some of those proggy things, if you want to play some of those kind of technical things, this guitar is going to be fantastic for that. If you're coming from a background that isn't overly too metal, even though it does do metal really well, but it does a lot of those like high gain proggy sounds really, really well, in addition to doing some of those really light sounds and some of those clean sounds as well, which again, pleasantly surprised by those clean sounds just coming through really crisp, really clear. So yeah, really sad I'm gonna have to send this back. If you've enjoyed the video, please subscribe to Renegade Guitar Company, where you can see more things like this, including more Tom Andersons and potentially some more of me maybe. Yeah, so if you are the lucky person who ends up buying this, please get in touch with me. I'd love to see what you do with it. But until then, I've been Thom Pankhurst for Renegade Guitar Company. This is my Tom Anderson that I custom spec'd out and I'm very sad to be sending back. I'll see you next time.